This video is a continuation of the exploitation of our Linux target. In the previous module we covered the Hail Mary as well as importing vulnerability scan results. What we have in front of us is the successful exploitation following the Hail Mary. And what we've done is we went through a number of shells and kind of reviewed how they were established, what they are. I want to provide you a specific example with one of the shells. If you right click on the target, the lightning bolts indicated it was successfully exploited. The shell number 5 allows us interaction session. So if you click on it, we'll come up with this particular shell. We're going to see the $sign. If you type in the whoami command, you're going to get the return of the currently logged in user. So this is the user that you're logged in with following the exploitation. Sometimes the user account is not going to be root. It may be www.data. And what you need to do in this case, www.data may not have privileges to be able to view a file like the etc passwd where the usernames are, or etc/shadow where the actual password hashes are. So what you need to do is look for privilege escalation as part of the post exploit that you can leverage to get to an account that can see this file and read it. So as a proof of concept, we use the cat command to read the contents of the etc shadow file, and what we see in there is the root, and we're seeing that the sys account has a password. So what we can do at this point is kind of highlight the results. We can copy, right click and copy the content and save them to a text file. So the text file can look like this. So right click and paste. And how did I get to paste to a file? Well, left hand side here, you're going to see a leaf pad. If you left click on it, you're going to open up and go to File, Save As, and you can create a file like this one. You can use a text editor like Vi or Nano. It's up to you. So once the file is saved, what else can we do? Well, we can engage in password cracking. This is going to be covered in a detail within the post exploitation, but in a nutshell, what we do is through the application menu, we can look for password attacks, and we see Johnny. Johnny is the same thing as John the Ripper, just the difference is John is command line interface and Johnny is GUI. So in Johnny, what we can do is go to open password file. You point to where the file is saved with your hashes. Post Linux hashes is where I saved it. So Linux desktop, and I go into post Linux hashes. I click open. So what's going to happen then is I'm going to have all of these hashes populated. Okay, I'm not going to have a password yet, but all of these hashes will be populated. The next thing I need to do is I click the start attack. If I look through the options, I'm going to leave the auto detection in place so it can detect the type of hash, and that's based on the number between the $sign. So when I'm looking in here, see if I can open this file up, it's going to be automatically detected what type of hash it is, but there's a difference between the number, and the number in the hash is going to relate to a different type of hash. And instead of knowing the details and having to look this up, we're going to let John the Ripper take care of this for us. We can use a wordless file. What we're doing if we're not specifying one is we're using the default one for John. But if we would like to use a custom one, we click browse, and the dictionary file is whatever we make it. And then we can change some of the other options. But in the end, the result is going to look like this. After about let's say 5 minutes or less, we're going to find we saw the sys account and the password is very easy, Batman, and it was recovered fairly quick. So there's some other ones that we see. So this is kind of the post exploitation. So we're going to move away from this, and then once we grab the hashes, what else can we do with here? One of the things that we can do is we can upgrade our session from shell, which is going to give us essentially anything that we can execute from the command line of the computer. This is if config. You know, if you'd like to create a file, read the service, see who's logged in, look into connections, you know, things like that. But this, you know, may not be as helpful as potentially, you know, logging in keylogger, you know, uploading files and stuff like this. In order to do that, we can upgrade our session from shell to interpreter. Interpreter is the advanced interpreter, which has a built-in functionality that can be very useful. And as soon as my Armitage responds, we see this. So if we go in here, what we need to specify is what is the session number that we would like to upgrade from a shell to interpreter. And then the local port, it doesn't matter as long as it's available. We specify the local host, and obviously we know this is our target. So we change the session, we click launch. And then what happens is if it was successfully established, in my case I use shell number 5. You're going to see another interpreter session open, and it's listed as number 10. And what we can do here is we can go in, interact. You know, what are the different options? Well, we can execute a command, we can kill a process, we can call for reverse to shell, we can downgrade to shell, we can look in system information, we can escalate privileges, we can use other commands, we can list running processes and other stuff. And interpreters sometimes can be more stealthy. We can do a migrate sometimes based on the operating system. So for like Linux, what we can do is we can migrate our shell from one service to another. And here's the migrate. And what that does is kind of hides our presence. So with this in mind, the Hail Mary doesn't always help us detect and validate all vulnerabilities. So going back to the Nmap example that I had, we need to go through the list and validate all the different vulnerabilities. And I'll give you an example. So for the proof of concept we have in the lab, we only agreed on high and critical level vulnerabilities validation. Well, some of those may not be caught by a vulnerability scanner, and they may be high or critical because they yielded a shell access to the remote system with root, but the vulnerability scanner did not detect them. Nmap detected that there was an open port, but Nmap is not sophisticated enough to tell us that there's a vulnerability. And Hail Mary did not have an exploit because sometimes it doesn't require an exploit. It may be already a shell that's being advertised, and all we got to do is connect to it. So I'm going to go and provide some examples of remote connection and things that may not necessarily have been detected, or maybe in the noise and maybe listed as low, that we can validate there is an actual exploit and it will allow us connection. So one of those things is if we use the remote shell. So let's get out of this. So if you're looking through our Nmap results, and it looks like I closed out the Nmap. So with Nmap, there are our login. So all these are our shell logins, okay? And our shell was not listed as one of the exploits there, okay? So what we can do is we can open up a terminal and check for the rlogin service on these ports, okay? So there's a built-in command, and we use the IP address of our target, and then we just run the ID command. So we see the remote shell is running as the user root, okay? So now what we can do is come into Armitage and look for this remote shell, or rlogin. So there is an auxiliary scanner, and it says R login. Okay, so what we're doing from here, we need to configure to execute. So for the from user file, it looks like it's doing the contents from user file. It looks like one per line. We don't need this. So we know the username, the remote host, the remote port, speed on success. So we're going to change it to 1. Username, root. And let's click launch and see if it works. So it's doing its magic, and look what happened. Session 11 opened. Session 11 and shell 11, it's right there. So if you were to repeat the same thing with port 512 and 514, we'll get shell 12 and 13. Okay, so that was another example. We see the IRCD was validated. Another example, there's a backdoor on port 1524. 1524. So if you look into here, 1524, look at this root shell. So how do we connect to this root shell? (1524). Look at this. I use netcat. Can I use telnet? Yes. Can I use a bind shell? Perhaps. But those are like the two easy ways. And what I'm doing, who am I? I'm root. So another thing that was overlooked is MySQL. Okay. So with MySQL, I'm going to do exit. It looks like it was running on 3306. 3306, okay, and MySQL had a weak password. So how can we do that? So we see that well, we can search in Armitage for MySQL, and what specifically are we looking for? We're looking for a login, something to help us brute force the login. So there's an auxiliary. Okay, with the auxiliary, all we need to do is kind of configure it, all right? So we're going to look into the different parameters. So for, let's see, we're going to go into user file, blank passwords. We're going to leave blank password. We're going to change this in success to yes, stop. 3306 is the default port. We're looking for the user file, and we're going to go in and browse. If I click on the plus, I should be able to browse in here, and I'll need to make sure that I'm within the word lists. So go into user, go all the way user. I need to go into share and then word lists. Word lists, and then I need to look into Metasploit. Then I'm going to look for the Unix passwords, or in this case users, and click open. Okay, and then the next component is blank passwords. So blank passwords. Now, a lot of these options you have to do trial and error, right? So if this doesn't work, you try another option until you exhaust the different variations. So let's see what this yields. It shouldn't take very long. So he was able to log in with the user guest. Now, he finished after the first attempt. Okay, so I think I need to rerun it because after the user guest, there's the user root as well. So if I rerun this, blank passwords 1, and what happened is, remember how I said the stop on success 1? It stopped after the first success. Well, there is more than one account that can, yield this, and we are more interested in the actual root account than the guest account. Metasploit, so we're going to show the difference here. Unix users open. Verbose yes, and let's rerun it and see what happens. So the first time we only got guess, right? So let's see what happens here. You see, oh, we found the guest. You see right there. And see if it found another one. See, now it found a second one, root. And if you look in here, found guest. So you got to be careful how you configure your exploits. Obviously I knew that there is a second one, but if I always go with the approach of stop on success after the first find, I'll never be able to get the complete results and go in and validate that. So how can we use this? We can go from a command line, we can connect to the database, we can see the contents of the existing database, and from there we can insert ourselves as a database user and ultimately take over the system. So very quick simulation of what that can look like. So MySQL, we can use the MySQL client. We're going to tell the host that we're going to connect to, which is 15. We're going to tell it the username, which was root. The password is blank. Let's see. And now we're inside the MySQL. Now if I do help, I can see, help menu. If I do show databases, I can see the different databases that are available. Let's say that I'd like to use the MySQL one. MySQL. So okay, I'm inside the MySQL database. So show tables. I see the different tables here. Okay, there's particular interest, user. Okay. So now I want to do select. I want to do all from user. And I can see everything from the user is selected. And now I can see that I have user and password. Okay, so I would like to select user from user. So I'm selecting the user field from the user table. And I see these are my different users. Okay, but now I would like to do the same thing and select the password field from the user table. There's no password. And this is kind of the interesting thing. So automated vulnerability scanners are going to take us, a certain piece of information. Automated exploitation is going to, give us certain exploits, but it's not going to replace neither of them manual validation and accuracy verification. That's why we use Nmap. We go through the port. We take a methodical approach and validate the results with the vulnerability scanner as well as the exploitation tool.